Right, hello folks. So I'm going to do a close reading of Act 2, Scene 2, lines 201 to 227 of Antony and Cleopatra, starting with Enobarbus speaking, the barge she sat in, until Agrippa's words, rare Egyptian. In this scene, Enobarbus tells Maecenas and Agrippa about Cleopatra's first meeting with Antony. And at this moment in the play, we've just learned that Antony has agreed to marry Caesar's sister Octavia. So Enobarbus starts by describing a scene. The barge she sat in like a burnished throne burnt on the water. The poop was beaten gold, purple the sails, and so perfumed that the winds were love-sick with them. As you can see, this is one long sentence which makes one's breathless at reading it. And obviously it conveys the breathlessness of Enobarbus as he witnessed this moment. The barge is alliterated with burnished, burned later on, showing that Cleopatra is able to combine opposite materials, that is to say, water and fire. As you remember, the scene occurs on the river. Burnt on the water, line 202, combines these two elements. From the start, Cleopatra is associated with power, throne. Okay, she's sitting on her throne, and we have a huge display of her wealth, rich materials such as gold, perfumes, silver, line 204, beaten gold, and there is also, you could say, the idea that she is a political queen with the idea of military power, the idea of burning, beaten gold, purple, the color of blood, the chiasmus, I would say, between poop and gold, purple sails. So the noun, the adjective followed by the noun. The chiasmus tends to convey the control that Cleopatra handles over the spectators of her apparition. You may have noticed as well that in addition to fire and water, you've got also the air, which is controlled by Cleopatra, perfumed, and the only element which is not associated with Cleopatra at this point is the earth, which is rather associated with Antony in the second half of this long speech by Enobarbus. Other elements, that is to say, sensations. You've got the sense of sight, obviously, with the burnished throne, the various colors which are mentioned, but also the sense of smell with the perfumes, line 203, the sense of touch, strokes, line 207, which means caresses, the sense of hearing with the tune of flutes. So you've got many senses which are described and which are alluded to and which participate in the erotic dramatization of Cleopatra. Purple the sails, so perfumed that, note also the hyperboles, so perfumed that the winds were lovesick. Lovesick is also at the same time an expression of a hyperbolic expression, but also part of the erotization of the scene and of Cleopatra as the element which is lionized in this scene. The oars were silver, which to the tune of flutes kept stroke and made, kept stroke. Stroke, the polyptoton stroke here and later on 207, alludes to caresses, but also to rhythm. And you may have noted that the speech of Enobarbus is written in blank verse, that is to say, a series of unrhymed iambic pentameters. So you've got this question of rhythm which is underlined and also very nuanced variations in terms of rhythmic organization, with pauses after stroke, line 205, after strokes again, 2 lines afterwards, after description, after pavilion, line 209. In other terms, you've got a great variety of rhythmic organization. Obviously, the barge in which Cleopatra is like a stage and is also organized as a display of all the various types of power that she embodies. And the main power is obviously amorous power, is obviously love, as amorous of their strokes or lovesick. You have a Petrarchan perspective through the eyes of Enobarbus, and this is developed later on. For her own person, line 207, you've got a gradual zooming in on the queen, on Cleopatra herself. First the stage, the barge, and then zooming in on her, line 207. For her own person, it beggared all description. You have an obvious opposition between a beggar and a queen. The spectators are in the position of beggars, and this is part of the hyperbolic terms that are used by Enobarbus to convey the idea that this is an extraordinary woman, literally out of the ordinary. She did lie in her pavilion, so at the act of lying shows that she is self-assured. Cloth of gold of tissue, so you have another pair of opposite terms, tissue on the one hand, softness, and gold, hardness, in the same way as you had the opposition between fire and water. In other terms, Cleopatra is an oxymoronic queen. She manages to combine opposite elements. Cloth of gold of tissue, over picturing that Venus where we see the fancy outwork nature. 2 hyperboles, over picturing and outworking nature. This is an artificial queen who is better than the mythological goddess of love, Venus, and she's also beyond the reach of nature, the fancy outwork nature, line 211. Clearly, Enobarbus casts himself in the position of a spectator. We see, and it's a way of drawing the spectators on stage, Agrippa, but also Maecenas, into the description, but obviously also the spectators in the theatre. On each side her stood pretty dimpled boys. There is an architecture of the picture. Like smiling Cupids. Cupid is obviously the little god of love, with divers coloured fans, whose wind did seem to glow the delicate cheeks which there did cool. Various elements here. The association of colors and air, so the sense of sight and the sense of touch, and you could perhaps mention the idea of a synesthesia here, that is just the combination of various senses in the same context. To glow the delicate cheeks which there did cool. You may remember that this element, this line, is almost taken word for word from the very beginning of the play, Act 1, Scene 1. And these words were applied to Antony, with this opposition between cooling and glowing, hot and cold. And what they undid did. The final words of the first half of the speech conclude on an opposition, words that signal an opposition. The delicate cheeks is a metonymy for her face and for her whole being. Cleopatra here is nameless. She's not named, okay, because she's well known. And although the first half of Enobarbus' speech is about Cleopatra, Agrippa exclaims his surprise, and he speaks about Antony. Oh, rare for Antony! Agrippa thinks not in erotic terms, but in political terms, and he has understood the difficulty of the political situation for Antony. Enobarbus starts again, resumes his speech. Her gentlewomen, like the Nereides, sea nymphs. In other terms, he clearly mythologizes Cleopatra with these mythological allusions. So many mermaids tended her in the eyes, that is to say, obeyed her looks. Cleopatra is on the side of the performatives. One word is one action, is tantamount to an action, and even one gesture is enough. Okay? And made the band's adornings. She manages to transform everything into beauty, into beautiful surroundings, a beautiful context, a beautiful stage. At the helm, a seeming mermaid steers the silken tackle. The sails and riggings are made of a nice material, silk. Okay? Note the alliteration in S, seeming steers silken, combined with dentals, mermaid steers, tack, and the alliteration in K, combining softness, perhaps the blowing of the wind, and hardness at the same time. Swell with the touches of those flower-soft hands. Again, you've got the combination of dentals, touches, soft hands, S sounds, swell, touches, and F sounds, flower soft, soft as flowers. The movement of the tackle, swell with the touches, is particularly erotic. It's like an erection that yearly frame the office. So the idea of architecture that I had pinpointed before is taken up here with the idea of visual organization of Cleopatra's barge and stage managing. From the barge, a strange, invisible perfume hits the sense. Hits belongs to the same idea as beaten gold, the idea that this erotic power of Cleopatra is slightly aggressive, conquering. Strange is something of the mind at the same time as the sense is something of the body. So she's able to manage, to control, to conquer the mind as well as the body. Note the use of the present simple, implying that this is the customary effect produced by Cleopatra. The city cast her people out upon her, so she's very popular, and the residents, the inhabitants, have turned themselves out of their own will into spectators. As opposed to the burnished throne of Cleopatra, Antony's throne, which is in the marketplace, and Antony enthroned in the marketplace, which is obviously a common place, not belonging to the place of the king, did sit alone. Okay? She's very popular, but Antony at that time, at the first meeting with Cleopatra, sits alone. Okay? So you can see the opposition between, and a series of oppositions between Antony and Cleopatra, and Antony being obviously on the weaker side. Did sit alone whistling to the air, which but for vacancy had gone to gaze on Cleopatra too. So even the air would have come to attend the arrival of Cleopatra, but it would have created a vacuum. So this is a very far-fetched hyperbole, and made a gap in nature, creating vacuum. And Agrippa repeats the term rare, but uses it to describe Cleopatra at the end. So obviously the second exclamation of Agrippa is it signals his admiration for her. The figure of speech here is an antenaclasis, antanaclase in French, an antenaclasis, that is to say, the use of the same term with two different meanings. In the first occurrence, line 215, rare means extraordinary, and in the final line, rare means unique. Okay, Cleopatra is unique, and as opposed to the tune of flutes, which accompanies the arrival of Cleopatra, turning her into a work of art. Antony is described as whistling to the air, which is ludicrous. Okay? Antony is ridiculous, alone on the marketplace, whistling to the air, with no one attending him. So now in the next video, I'm going to offer an organized outline, gathering the various elements that I have mentioned into an organized commentary. Thank you.